Hey everyone, today is new pattern day, sort of. So you all know the DB crossbody, you love it, many of you have made it, I've seen you post it on the Facebook group. We have many variations of it here, but we now have written instructions for it and we've renamed it the Bircham. So we've made a few little tweaks to it to improve it, and let's go over the bag. So this is the one we're making in today's video. And one of the things that we did was we raised the zipper placket higher on the bag. And that's something that I know a lot of you had asked for. The original pattern, it was a little bit too deep, so we raised it up. The other thing we did was changed the strap adjusters, or not the strap adjusters, the strap connectors. So the reason why we did that is because the old strap connectors connected here on the bag, and you had to make sure you kept it outside the seam allowance, otherwise your bag would fall apart because you cut through the stitches. And it looked like this. It was really a cute little strap connector, but if you didn't get it placed just right, your bag would fall apart. So this is a little bit more user-friendly. It's a little easier, maybe better for a beginner to go ahead and put the strap adjusters on after the bag is done and you rivet it on. Okay, now this is leather, and this is a Chanel leather that I got from Italy. We do have kits available in this color, but we also have kits available in the darker color. So let me show you that real quick so that you can kind of see which one you would prefer. This lighter color looks a little orange. It looks a lot more orange on camera than it is. It's not quite this orange. It's really a very light brown. It's like a dark brown and a light brown. It has some orange in it, but it's not that bad. This is the darker hide, and it actually is darker than when it's coming up on camera. Unfortunately, sometimes the lights kind of mess us up, but you can see it actually is quite a bit darker. So we have kits available in both. I did not make a kit, or did not make a bag in this one because we don't have a lot of this, and I really wanted to make it kits for you instead of using it to make a bag. You know what the bag is, you can kind of see what it's going to look like, okay? So the other thing I did different in this bag, and this is not part of the kit is going to have a slide buckle and a actual rectangle ring, kind of like what we did when we did the live on this version here. And I will link the live down below so you can go back and rewatch it. But we actually had a slide buckle on this one. And the reason why you need to do something like this with leather is because you usually can't get the full 55-inch width of leather, and you have to kind of get a little creative. So this is the one we did in the live. We've added a nice little concha there in the front, so cute. This one I used little buttons, and these are the kind that you can actually just pull apart. And when I say pull apart, you just pull them. They stay really well. Pull them out of the bag, and then you can adjust it up or down, and then just put them back through the holes. Okay? So I show you how to do all that in the video, show you what tools you need and everything else. So we have a couple of leather versions, and then of course we have our faux leather versions, which same thing, just using faux leather. This is the bright blue that we carry in the shop, so you can order some of that. And then this was just a darker blue that I had a while ago. This is one of the first ones I made. And this one I did with a black, and this one here I did with a camel color. So it's really fun to change it up and to use some accents on it, use some different color zippers. Y'all have been so creative in the bags that you've done online with this. It's just amazing. And then we also did a video on this here with it being quilted. And this is the faux leather that I carry on the site. We carry it in like 10 different colors, but it's beautiful. I mean, it quilts absolutely wonderful. So if you are interested in quilting, then you want to grab some of these because these are fabulous when it comes to quilting. This is the bag we're doing today, the Bircham, now available in writing, full pattern on the website. It's still a cutting chart pattern in the sense that the pattern pieces can all be cut for measurements. However, if you want the pattern pieces, all you have to do is when you purchase the pattern, there's a coupon code in there that you can use to download the pieces for free, okay? So however you prefer to do it is fine. It's totally up to you. And without further ado, let's get stitching the brooch. We're going to start by going over pattern pieces, and we're going to do it in the order of steps in the pattern. There's 5 steps in the pattern. So the first step is the crossbody strap and the strap connectors. So when you do your strap connectors, you can just cut out one piece. We're going to end up cutting it in half, but it just makes it a little easier to sew all together. And I'm going to tell you that I put a little bit of Decovil light on the back of my strap connector right down the middle, because this is a very light leather and I wanted to make sure that it had enough strength. So if you're using a faux leather or a real leather and you feel like it's a little thin, go ahead and add a little strip of that right down the center, and it's just going to give you a little extra support on your handle connectors. Because I'm using leather, I could not get the full length on a crossbody strap, the full 55 inches. So I have 2 pieces here that I'm going to use. I'm going to connect them with a rectangle ring, and then I'm going to use a roller buckle to actually connect it to the bag. So if you're using a faux leather or cotton, just use a strap adjuster here and you'll be good to go. Step 2 is the exterior of the bag. And for the exterior, we have our 2 exterior pieces. And we have 2 of these. I use Decovil light on the back. Now, when you put this Decovil light on, you want to draw a line a 1/2 inch from the very top. And you can see it's wider than it is tall. So make sure you do it on one of the wider sides, draw that line, and then put your Decovil light right up to that line. And you're going to see that it does not go all the way to the bottom. You have a couple inches here at the bottom, and that's correct. So use the Decovil light to both. If you have a really thin material you're using, you may want to go ahead and use Decovil heavy instead. You could certainly do that. We're going to fuse the Decovil heavy after we're through with this. So I also have a piece of Decovil heavy, which I don't have here for some reason, so I'll get it before we start. And then you're also going to need your zipper pockets, which I've got 2 zipper pockets, put interfacing on the back, and of course your zipper, okay? Because it does have an exterior zipper. The third step is our zipper placket, and for that you're going to have zipper placket pieces in your main fabric, and then also your lining. You're going to have 2. The lining gets backed with interfacing, but there's nothing on the main pieces. Just leave those untouched on the back. And then, of course, you need your zipper. The 4th step, we're going to put the lining together. For the lining, you have your upper lining pieces, and on these pieces, you want to go ahead and put your stabilizer centered on the back. So I know this is white on the back and that stabilizer is off-white. Hopefully you can see it's just centered all the way around. So I have 2 upper lining pieces. I have my zipper overlay, which I cut out of my main. I have my slip pocket accent, which I cut out of my main. And then I have my key fob, which I cut out of the main. I also have my zipper pocket pieces. Again, these are backed with interfacing. I use Woven Fuse 2, but you can use SF101 or whatever you would like. There's lots of different variations out there. We have a little slip pocket that we're going to put together. So it's just a little slip pocket piece. And then we have our 2 lining pieces, which are both backed with with Woven Fuse or some kind of interfacing. We have 2 of these, and then we have our zipper, which we need for our zipper pocket. For hardware, you're going to need a couple of swivel clasps so that you can attach the crossbody to the bag. You're going to need a couple of D-rings, or I'm using triangle rings for this bag. Of course, you're going to need your zipper pulls. You're going to need a zipper end. For your key fob, you're going to need a 1/2 inch swivel clasp, and then you're going to need some rivets, things like that. To attach the actual strap connectors to the bag, I used 12mm rivets, and then on the inside, I used just a 8mm for the slip pocket to kind of hold that in place. Okay, so let's get sewing. Step 1 is the handle and handle connectors. The first thing that I did was draw a line down the center of both handle pieces and also my strap connectors. You see I have 2 pieces here. Basically, I folded one already and then cut it in half and cut my curved edges in with my leather punch. Now, if you buy this kit, you're going to receive the roller buckle and a rectangle ring, and you want to make this strap an adjustable strap with the roller buckle. And we did that in the last live that we made this exact bag on, so you can refer back to that video for instructions on it. I'll link it below for you. But today I thought I would show you something new and different, and something that you see a lot in leather bags, and it's really not difficult to do. It's just another way of making an adjustable strap. So I'm going to use an extra rectangle ring for this. So I actually have 2 rectangle rings, and you can use an O-ring for this. You know, it doesn't have to be rectangle. Rectangle just happens to be what I have on hand. And then you're going to use these little buttons, these little like Conway buttons. Let me show you what that is. It's almost like a rivet. Well, actually, it's almost like a Chicago screw, because it actually has a screw back. So you have a screw and then a little almost rivet looking thing, but you see it's raised. And what we're going to do is mount these on this strap, and then we're going to use this tool, and it's like a leather punch, but you see it's got an extra little cut piece here in it to cut the holes for it. Now, if you don't have, these are fairly inexpensive. You can get them from Gold Star Tool. You get, like, I think 100 of them for a really good price. This tool here, if you don't have this tool, and if you don't want to buy a tool like this, you can just use a regular hole punch, and then just use your craft knife to create this extra little cut in the leather, okay? So I have the tool, I'm going to use it. But before we do any of that, we're going to start out by showing you how to fold these straps. And we've done this before, but I still want to run through it again. So you're going to put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each side of your line. And then I also put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each of these short ends, because when I punch, use my leather punch and punch my curved edge, I want to make sure it stays nice and flat. So I'm just going to put this on the short edge. And down here. So we're going to move the backing off the tape and fold this long edge into the center. So include taking the back off the sides here. Take the back off the center, and when you fold this up, fold it just below your line. You don't want to fold it to the line. We want to leave a little bit of space. between the two folds to give our material a little bit of space to fold in half. Okay, we're going to do the same thing on this side. And you notice I'm not running my fingers down this strap. I want to make sure that I don't push the fabric so it ends up twisting in the end. So see how nice and flat that lays before we even get started? And you can see here, we have got that space right in between. So now when we fold this up, it has space to fold in half. I'm just going to put some clips down this. And at the very end, I'm going to put a little bit more 1/4 inch double-sided tape to hold this edge down. So I'm just going to put a little piece of it on there like that. Peel the backing off. And then fold that in half, and it'll stay nice and flat. Do the same thing over here on this side. And then we're going to continue clipping. Now I'm going to leave this piece long because I don't want that rectangle ring to sit on my shoulder when I have the bag on. So this is going to be the piece that goes over the shoulder. I'm going to cut my ends in with my leather punch, and then a rectangle ring is going to go on each side of this, and we're going to fold it up. Then we're going to end up connecting these sides, and this is where our adjustment is going to come in, okay? So we'll get to that in a minute, but I just wanted to show you how to fold that, and we're going to use these examples to go ahead and stitch. On your strap connector, you want to do exactly the same thing. We're going to put 1/4 inch double-sided tape, only this time we want the centers to match because we're not going to fold it again. We're just going to fold the long edges in one time. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I do have a little bit of extra stability on here with some Decoville Light right down the middle. So I'm going to fold this up so that it touches the line. So this is a 2-inch wide piece, and this stabilizer is 1 inch. It's actually about just a little less than 1 inch. It's about 7/8 of an inch, just to get it in there and give my strap room to fold. So I'm going to fold that up. And before I stitch this, I know I had said I was going to stitch it at once, but before I stitch it, I'm actually going to cut it in half so I can cut my little ends in, my little ends with my leather punch. So just fold it in half, cut it, and now I'm going to take this over to my punching station and just punch my little edges in so that they're curved like this. Once I do that, I'm going to stitch around. So we'll do that in just a minute, but let's go ahead and stitch these together first. So if you've watched me before, you know that I always use my edge guide whenever I'm doing handles. I'm also going to start from a folded edge right down here at the bottom by the curve. Take a few stitches and then sew the curve first, and then come up this long edge and then sew the other curve before I come down the folded edge. By starting down here, you're going to be able to pull your threads through to the back. You're going to be able to knot them, burn them, and then when you fold this over, you're not even going to be able to see your knot. So I'm going to set up my edge guide. And then as I come around these edges, I'm just going to hand crank. And this is the leather you're definitely going to want to edge coat and top coat at paint because it is white on the back. All right. Go ahead and hand crank again around this edge. And then come down this side. Now before I get to where my stitches meet, I'm going to pull this through. And I'm going to finish stitching. And I want to start exactly the same hole, or stop in exactly the same hole I started. You pull this through to the back, tie it off, and we'll just singe this thread so that it doesn't come apart, this knot. All right, take your lighter and just go ahead and burn these edges. And you're just melting the thread is what you're doing here. Okay. So I'm going to repeat this process for this here, for my strap connectors, and then also for the longer piece. I'm going to take it over to my table. I'm going to put some edge coat or some base coat on here and then some color. And then at the end, we will go ahead and finish up and make this an adjustable strap with these pieces. So all my handle pieces have edge coat and they're sitting over drying. And we're going to move on to the next step, which is the exterior. So the first thing we need to do is cut our squares in our main pieces. And when you cut the squares, you're going to see that it is outside of the decabill. The decabill ends right here, and the square, you're going to have a good, a little over ½ inch left over. So I give you the measurements in the pattern, and you just want to draw out the squares on the bottom of your bag. So make sure, again, that you are drawing these squares on the side that has the largest gap on the back with your decabill. And of course it is wider than it is tall, so you want to do this on, have the wide end at the bottom when you make these marks. So I'm just going to draw these in. Now if you cut using the pattern pieces, then you're not going to have to do this step. Those were already marked on those pattern pieces and this was done for you. So once I mark those, I'm just going to use my scissors and just cut this out. Okay, there's a little square. Okay, easy enough. So now we're going to need to make some markings for our zipper pocket. If for some reason you like one of these better than the other, you might want to decide what's your front, what's your back, what you maybe don't want to see the zipper pocket on, maybe which one side you do. Mine are very comparable. I don't have a problem with either side. So I'm just going to stick with this side right here. And again, I give you these measurements in the pattern, and we are just going to measure down and draw a line all the way across. So I'm going to do this in ballpoint pen so that you can see it. So I'm going to draw a line, and then I'm going to come down ½ inch, and I'm going to draw another line. So these lines are parallel to each other. We're going to find the center of the bag by just folding this in half, and you can either notch this or use your pen to mark it. And then from the center mark in both directions, we're going to draw another line. So I'm going to make sure everything is lined up. And I'm just going to draw a short intersecting line. And this is essentially going to be the side. We're going to cut this box out. So measure down, let's make sure everything looks straight. And there's our box. So I like to use a craft knife and a ruler for this. And I'm just going to lay this on my cutting board. Use my ruler and put the very point of this right in the point of the corner. So basically right where the corner meet, I'm going to stick this right there and I'm going to pull towards the other side. Okay, now I'm using leather and sometimes you have to make a couple passes, so I probably should have waited to pull that through or pull that off until I could see that it worked. So let me do the other side and then I'll fix that. So I'm going to put my craft knife right at that point. Line this up, make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'm just going to pull down, and before I move my ruler, I'm going to do it one more time. There we go. And see, that went through great. So now I'm going to do these little tiny sides. And you can use scissors instead if you prefer. I think this craft knife gets in the corner a little bit better. Oh, my blade's coming out. Okay, so let me just use a little clip right there. Okay. And I need to cut the rest of this side out. I'm going to do it with scissors because I don't want to use the craft knife and make a cut off center from where I was. It's a lot easier to see with these scissors. Okay, so now because this is white, I do want to go ahead and edge coat this edge before we continue. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then we'll come back and continue. So while that edge paint is drying, we're going to go ahead and work on the zipper pocket. Now, just a quick note, I do not put any base coat on the inside of that zipper opening. I just put a little bit of paint just to hide the white because I just don't want to see that from the front. So I'm just going to burn the edge of the zipper, make sure it doesn't fray. And I'm going to put the wrong side of the zipper against the right side of the pocket, and we're going to stitch. We're going to fold the seam allowance towards the pocket so that the zipper is laying nice and flat. and we're going to top stitch. So this is what we have so far. We're going to take the other side of the pocket, put the right side of the pocket against the wrong side of the zipper. And I'm just going to make sure my pockets are lined up. And we're going to stitch. And then one more time, we're going to flip the seam allowance towards the pocket and top stitch so all of this lays flat. From here, install your zipper pull so you don't forget about it. I just have my handy dandy fork here that I use. We're going to put 1/4 inch double-sided tape at the very edge of the zipper tape. So don't put it on the pocket, but actually on the zipper tape. Very edge. All right, I'm going to go see if my paint is dry, and if it is, we'll put this pocket in. So the paint is dry. I'm going to go ahead and peel the backing off of this tape, and we're going to center the zipper in the opening. Okay, so this is what we have. I have my pole closing to the left. And now we're going to stitch around this box. Make sure my zipper looks good here. If not, you can adjust. No worries. And let's stitch. I'm going to pull my threads through the back. I'm not going to top stitch here, since this is on the front of my bag. Pull my threads through. And I just want to make sure that I start and stop in the same hole. Looks like I need to go a little bit further here. We're going to tie these off, and we will burn the thread to kind of seal it. Make sure the knot does not come undone. Okay, so from the back, this is what you have, an open pocket, and then from the front, we have the zipper pocket. So from here, we're going to flip this over and take the top pocket here and fold it down to the bottom. We're going to clip it in place. And whenever you use this method, you're always going to have about 1 inch to 1.25 inches left over at the bottom here for your bottom pocket. We're just going to cut that off. Okay, so now we're going to sew around these 3 edges. We're not keeping this pocket open, we want to close it. So turn your project with right side up and just pull the zipper back from the side here so that you can see some of the zipper. And it's going to be tight, but you'll have enough room. You're going to back stitch over your zipper and then go down and we'll go around. Stitch the bottom. And we'll turn this and stitch up the other side. I'm going to move my zipper pull over here and then stitch up this side. Have any extra zippy here on the back, you can cut that off. And then I'm just going to burn the edge of that zipper, melt it. So we don't have any fraying problems. And then just like that, we have our zipper pocket done. So from here, we need to sew our bottoms together. So take your other piece, put this right sides together, and we're going to stitch the bottom. I'm going to put a couple of clips on here, make sure everything stays lined up. And then sew this bottom lace flat. We're going to top stitch this seam down. Just going to open this up and finger press it. Then we're going to flip it over and we're going to top stitch on each side of this seam. So now by doing that, your seam is going to lay nice and flat and you won't have it sticking up in the bag. So get your piece of Decovil Heavy and we're going to put that on next. So the Decovil Heavy piece is going to get fused to the bottom. So just take and center it between the 2 sides here, and also between the Decovil light pieces. You're gonna have a little bit of a gap between, and that's just to give the bag a nice crisp edge here when it folds. So I'm going to fuse this on, and then I'm gonna show you that if you either can't get it to fuse properly, or maybe I don't know, maybe using something other than Decovil, something that's not fusible, you can actually stitch around this, and we're going to do that. It's going to add a little bit of a decorative touch to the bottom and also help hold this down. So I'm going to run over the iron and fuse this first, and then we'll stitch it. I have this fused on enough so that it stays put. And now what I'm going to do is stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around this rectangle. And actually I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance here instead of a 1/2 inch, because the 1/4 inch is the edge of my foot, so I know exactly where that is. And obviously you want to make sure that your stitches look good on the bobbin side as well as the top. Well, the top doesn't really matter, it's going to be on the inside of the bag. But we want them to, we definitely want to make sure your bobbin stitches look good. I'm going to start and stop in the same hole, pull these threads through. And one thing that might help is if you draw this box out first on your Decovil, just so that you hit the corners right and everything. That would be a good little tip to make sure that everything looks good from the other side. Alright, I'm going to make sure I get in that same hole. Pull this thread through. Tie these off. And now we have a decorative element that is actually functional too, because it's holding this Decovil in place. You can either put some double-sided tape on this or burn the edge, whatever works. Okay, so I'm using a thread that matches really well, so it's a little hard to tell, but I do have a nice square underneath here. So from here, we're just going to match up these side seams. Throw a few clips on here. And if for some reason when you do this, maybe you didn't cut your squares exactly even, and it's not matching up at the top and bottom, match up your top. Because that's where, when we fold this over, we want everything to be nice and even on the very top. The bottom we can kind of fudge and hide in the seam. If we need to. So I'm going to stitch these side seams, and just remember you don't ever want to stitch on your actual Decovil. You want to always stitch next to it. So this is the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So just go ahead and take that 1/2 inch, and we're going to open up the seam afterwards. And you notice I'm starting at the top on each one of these seams because I want to make sure my tops match exactly right. So if I have any slipping or if my fabric moves at all, it'll be at the bottom, not at the top. So before we box our corners, we want to go ahead and open up the seam. But obviously we can't do it on the machine because we can't get our machine down in there. So I'm just going to use some double-sided tape. This is the 1/2 inch. And I'm going to put it right next to the stitch line. Peel the backing off that tape. And then just open this up. Okay, I'm going to repeat the same thing for all the other seams. So now that the seams are all down, we're going to just box our corners. And you can see it almost wants to do it on its own. I'm just going to match the side seam with the bottom seam. And they should both be open, and it should match up nicely. Do the same thing on this side. And then I'm just going to stitch right next to the Decoville on both of these. I'm going to stitch from the bottom here so that I can see the bottom Decoville. You definitely do not want to stitch on top of that. From here, let's just go ahead and trim this seam allowance down to about 1/4 inch. Then we can turn the bag. And there's the exterior. Now you can put your logo down here below this on the zipper side, or if you prefer to have it on the non-zipper side, you can certainly do that too, anyway, wherever you'd like. And I'm going to just have a little mini iron. I'm going to stick it inside this bag now and press this real good because we're not going to turn this again. We're going to slip this inside the lining and pull it off the bottom so it's not going to get scrunched up. So that will get this nice and flat and get all these wrinkles out. So I'm going to do that, and we are going to move on to the zipper placket. Step 3, we're going to work on our zipper placket. So we have our 2 main zipper placket pieces, our 2 lining zipper placket pieces here, and our zipper. So we're going to set these aside for just a minute, and on the zipper, we're going to mark down 1 inch and draw a line, and then we're going to pinch this up that 1 inch. So we get a nice right angle. So I'm just going to make a little line here. So you can see that 1 inch line. Just pull this apart a little bit. We're going to pinch right on that line and then fold that pinch up to the teeth. Oops. I'm going to put a pin. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. And our goal here is to make sure that the zipper teeth are even. So you can either hand tack these in place or you can use your machine. I'm going to use the machine, and whenever I do this, I always put the zipper tape to the back and then just stitch along the very side here. You see there, it's in the seam allowance, and it's just right there on the side. Just enough to hold this down. We have this all tacked and ready to go. So take your zipper placket pieces, usually line them all up in a row, and I'm going to put some 1/2 inch double-sided tape down each short edge. So I'm just going to clip these apart. I'm going to set one main piece and one lining piece aside. And on this first main piece, I'm going to fold both of these short edges to the wrong side 1/2 inch. And if you want to mark this, you certainly can. Measure 1 inch down and then fold down to the 1 inch line. I just use the zipper tape or the double-sided tape as a guide. And then we're going to fold only one edge of the lining. Okay, so now you get your 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape. Whoops, throwing things around here. And we're going to put this down one long edge of the main. And one long edge on the lining. Peel the backing off the tape, your main piece, and now we want to line the teeth. We just want to, you don't want to go further below this than you have to, this edge, but you want to give yourself enough space that you can sew this short edge without hitting your teeth. So go between, I don't know, about maybe about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch, maybe probably a little more than 1/8, maybe 3/8 down. And then you're just going to lay your zipper right on the tape. Okay? Just like that. So now take the backing off of the lining piece, and we're going to lay this on top. But the edge that's folded, I'm going to lay first, and I want to make sure that my edges match, my short edges match. Okay? Then I'm going to lay this down, and when I get to this other edge, I'm going to peel the backing off the tape, off the short edge, and I'm just going to fold this up so that it matches the main zipper placket piece. So now these edges are exactly right. So now I have all my edges matching up. We're going to sew this, and whenever I sew these, I always sew them with the zipper teeth facing down. I feel like it's a little easier for me to do that. I don't have as much bumps and lumps to go over. And then if you want to use your edge guide here, you can certainly do that, because this is going to be on the top of your bag and you want it to look really nice. So take your time with this. Go ahead and trim the extra little bit of zipper teeth you have here off. You can just put a little heat to that and melt it. And now we're going to fold these pieces wrong sides together. Just kind of finger press them open, and we're going to clip them. Now I usually like to wait to top stitch this first section closed until I do the other section in case I need to make any adjustments. So when I'm through and I have them both clipped like this, I can look to see how far away the placket is from the zipper teeth, and if it's further on one edge than the other, then I can go ahead and take another line of stitching. So just clip those like that, hold them in, or to hold them in place. And then we're going to work on the other side. So on this side, just peel the backing off one edge, one short edge, fold it over the 1/2 inch. Go ahead and put your 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape on the piece. And then we're going to lay this down. Now when we lay it down, we want to use the short edge that's folded first and make sure it's lined up with the other short edge. Okay, so make sure those are lined up really well. And then once they are, lay the rest of it down, and then peel the backing off the other side and fold it so it matches the other top zipper placket piece. Say that 10 times fast. Okay, so those now match. Okay, we're going to repeat that same process for the lining. Peel just one of the backing pieces off, fold it over, put your 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape, peel the backing off that tape, line up the folded side first, make sure it's nice and even. And then peel the backing off the other side and match it up to what's already there. Okay, so we're going to sew this side down. I'm using about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. clip off your zipper teeth that are sticking out. Melt the edge. And then let's go ahead and open this up. See how we did. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now that I know it looks good, I'm going to go ahead and top stitch. So you want to close this edge by top stitching it closed. You're going to top stitch close to your zipper. You're going to close this edge down here, and then you're just going to baste this raw edge closed over here on this side. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side here. Now, this is where you might have some bulk. You've got a lot coming together here. So you might need a hump jumper. You might need an extra little piece of leather to protect your project so that your walking foot doesn't eat it up. And then you may have to take a couple hand cranks with your machine. And that's okay if you need to do that. I usually do that with mine. I find that it helps get over the bulk. So I'm just going to do a back stitch here. And then come right up on the seam. And crank this and make sure my stitches are nice and even. Okay, and then right here I'm going to form a little hump jumper just by rolling this up and then stick this edge that's kind of left over underneath because I do not want that to eat my project. And I'm actually going to take a couple of hand cranks here to kind of get this moving through. And then once I know I'm over that bulk, I'll go ahead and stitch. Still gonna protect my project though. So I'm coming up on this side. So usually going up the hill isn't quite as bad as coming down as far as your presser foot. Back up just a little bit there. Okay. So let's create our little hump jumper. I'm going to hand crank a couple. Okay, and once I know I'm over that, I'm going to turn and baste. Now this is kind of a small zipper placket, so just take your time with it, hand crank where you need to, because you want to make sure that everything looks good, all your stitches look good, and everything's even. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this for the other side. that turned out really nice, and that little extra piece of leather really saved me from tearing this up because of the bulk in it. So from here, just pull this apart, and we're going to mark the center. I'm just going to put a little notch. And then we're going to set these aside, and we're going to start working on our lining, which is step 4. So grab all your lining pieces, and the very first thing we want to do is the same thing we did with our mane, is to cut our little squares out of the bottom. So I'm just going to stack them on top of each other. And I'm going to measure my little squares and cut them both out at the same time. Now you can certainly do this one at a time. Okay. While we're dealing with these pieces, let's go ahead and find the centers. Find it the top and the bottom. And we're going to take just one of these pieces and our zipper overlay. So put some 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch double-sided tape on that, and we're going to place it on here, right in the center. So in the pattern is the measurement for this, and from the top, which is of course the side without the square cutouts, you're going to center this and measure down. Make sure you got it good and centered here. And then from here, we're going to stitch around the large opening. So basically the outside edge, we're going to top stitch. Slip my little tag here underneath. I'm going to pull these other threads through the back. We're going to start and stop in the same hole. And I need to come one more stitch. There we go. Pull these through. Tie them off, and then you can either singe the edge or use a little bit of double-sided tape to hold it down. All right, let's cut the center out of this. sure you put your scissors underneath your overlay. You don't want to cut your overlay by accident. Just put the tip underneath there. And then we're going to turn it over and just finish cutting. Now y'all have heard me say this 100 times. You don't have to worry about it looking pretty in the back. Nobody's going to see it. We just want to make sure we don't see any lining from the front. Okay, so here's our back, and there's our pretty front. So let's set this aside for just a minute, and we're going to repeat the process we did before to make our zipper pocket. So we're going to take our zipper, wrong side against the right side of the pocket. We're going to stitch, top stitch, turn, repeat the whole thing. So from here, we're going to peel the backing off this tape and center it in this hole, just like we did when we put the zipper into the main part of the bag. We're going to stitch around the small portion, just like we did before. And then we're going to close two sides of this pocket. So from here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fold our pocket down, go ahead and clip it. We want to cut our bottom portion off here, that's extra. And we're going to sew each side. We're going to leave the bottom open because we're going to use that to help us turn the bag. So just turn this over, pull your zipper away, and stitch down. Make sure you back stitch real here at the bottom. So that when we're turning the bag and trying to get everything stitched up, you're not breaking your stitches there. All right, I'm going to trim off a little bit here. didn't try to get super close to the actual side of the bag here like I did on the front, because I want this opening to be as big as possible so that when we turn and pull this through to sew the bottom of our bag, I have plenty of room. Okay, so we have our zipper pocket done. Let's move on to our slip pocket. Take your other lining piece. We're going to set that aside. We're going to take our slip pocket piece, and it's small compared to what we're used to because this is a small bag. I'm going to put right sides together. We're going to stitch up both sides. I'm going to use about 1/4 inch seam allowance here. We're going to do our little trick to turn where we fold this right on the stitch line. We're going to stick our thumb and finger in here, hold that seam down, and then just turn and pop this out. And if I need to use a little bit of my point turner, I can do that. Just to kind of get that edge out nice and crisp without cutting anything. So I'm going to repeat on this side. Okay, I'm just going to use a scant 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here and just stitch this closed. And now I'm going to take this over to my iron and I'm just going to press it so it looks really nice and flat. So now we have a nice flat pocket. I'm going to take my slip pocket accent piece and put some 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each side. And you can use clips here. You don't have to use double-sided tape. I like the way it holds, so I do, and my machine doesn't mind it, so. This machine doesn't mind it. My domestic machine does. A whole nother story. Now, if you wanted to draw a line down the center of this, you certainly can. And then when you line this up, you're going to line it just below the line. Because just like the handles, we want to give it room to turn. So I'm going to take the backing off this tape. Lay it on here. And then just fold the top down. Just like that. And now we're going to stitch it. Now once we stitch it, go ahead and trim the edges off so it's even with the pocket. Now we have our cute little slip pocket. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to center it here, measure down. Make sure I'm centered. And because this pocket is so small, I am not going to divide it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going to stitch around. Okay, from here I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of rivets in the side of this pocket. I do that with all of my slip pockets just to kind of hold them, give them a little extra strength. There's a lot of pressure going in and out of these pockets and I don't want it to rip from the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and set a couple rivets and then we're going to move on. Rivets are set. Everything looks good. Before we put this together, we're going to work on our key fob. So I'm just going to take some 1/4 inch double-sided tape. You can clip this instead if you prefer. I'm going to run it along the side. I'm going to fold this in half and just do my best to get these raw edges to meet. However, they don't match up exactly. It's okay. We're going to trim off a little bit. So go ahead and stitch this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the raw edge. So from here, I'm going to trim off that 1/4 inch, or about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to slip this on and rivet it in place. Here is the completed key fob. Easy enough. So now let's put all of this together. So starting with your zipper pocket piece, take your zipper placket piece and you want to make sure that the end of the zipper is going in the same direction as the end of this zipper. And we're just going to clip this at the top, centering it. Because we already have the center mark in our zipper placket and we have the center mark in our lining. So I'm just matching those center marks up. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this on the side with the pocket, the slip pocket. It doesn't matter which side you do it on. I'm going to slip my key fob piece right underneath. And I'm going to do it on the side where my zipper opens so that if the bag is closed and I need to get a key, I can just open this from this side. The key is going to be right there. I don't have to open it the entire way to get the key from this side. Does that make sense? And you can either set it right next to or right underneath your zipper placket. I like to put it just underneath. Clip that in place, and then we're going to baste these on. Okay, so from here, grab your upper lining. We're going to clip it on. And unless you're using directional fabric, there's no right or wrong way to put this on. And we're going to stitch this on. from here, you're going to flip the seam or the upper lining up, and you're going to keep your seam allowance behind your upper lining. We're going to top stitch on the upper lining and catch that seam allowance underneath. Now be careful here if you have a walking foot machine, because as you go up and down the hills of the bulk with your zipper placket, your foot might catch. So just be careful of that. You will see me grab for my leather. I'm going to repeat that on the other side. We have our lining pieces completed. So now we just need to put it all together. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I get my zipper tape out of the way. I do not want to accidentally stitch over that. I'm going to put these right sides together and make sure that my upper linings match exactly. And then stitch or clip down the sides, the rest of the side. Make sure those match exactly. Now, because that's the point that I want to match up exactly, that's where I'm going to start on both sides. So I'm just going to slide this under, make sure they're matching, stick my needle in. Once I do, it can't move. Now I'm going to back stitch up to the top and then come down. So because this bag was cut from measurements, you do need to take a little bit wider seam allowance as you're stitching down. So I start out at a 1/2 inch and increase to about a 5/8. I'm going to repeat on the other side. So let's trim these seam allowances back, but don't trim it to the top. We want to trim it just beyond this bulk and leave the top long so that we can open the seam allowance without a problem as we're stitching the top. So I'm going to go just beyond this bulk and then just clip it off. There we go. Okay, so we have like little bat wings over here. So you could, if you wanted to, you could put some double-sided tape. I'm just gonna kind of finger press them open. It'll be fine. So take your main part of your bag. This is now step 5, which is finishing. We're going to take the main part of the bag and we're going to slip it inside of the lining. And your lining's a little smaller because we took a little larger seam allowance, so it might be a tight fit. You're going to match your side seams first. We're going to clip them. Okay, and then we're going to clip around the rest of the bag, all the way around the top. So from here we're going to top stitch. We're not going to top stitch yet. We're going to stitch this bag at the top. We're going to stitch it closed. So you want to stitch, of course, next to your Decoville. I'm going to stitch from the inside here because that's where I can see all of the Decoville light. Granted, we do have some on these upper linings, but the most part of it, the main pieces that have it, are these inside pieces. So I'm just going to lay this flat on my bed here and stitch around. And you drew a line in the very beginning to line up your Decoville a ½ inch from the top. So essentially you have your seam allowance marked. So just follow that line. And as I do this, I'm just kind of rolling the bag. Oh, and I ran out of bobbin way over here. Let me reclip this. I even thought, check your bobbin before you stitch, and I did not do it. Pick up here where it left off and see if we can get these stitches right. All right, I'm going to turn this and take a look and see if I can see any of those holes, and if so, I may have to restitch. So it happens to all of us. Darn bobbin. I'm going to have to iron this bag again. Let's see. I think that's going to be okay. Got lucky on that one. Okay. So we're going to push this lining to the inside of the bag. And I'm going to clip around the top. Now before I top stitch this closed, and we're going to do this at the cylinder arm machine, I'm going to hammer these side seams. That's the one spot on this bag where there's a lot of bulk, and if you have a domestic machine, it might be a little bit difficult, depending on your machine, to get over that seam. So the thing about this leather is you can use it on a domestic machine. You've seen me do it. But those seams might be the problem. So what I would do is I wouldn't sew with the seam. I would start top stitching just beyond the bulk, and I would go around to the other side and I would stop. And then over this side, I would do the same thing. I would start here, and I would go over here to the other side, and I would stop. You can have a little section right here that's not top stitched, but it's going to look a whole lot better to do that than it's going to be trying to get over this and have your machine either tear up the bag, or you have a bunch of holes in the bag that you don't want. And honestly, nobody will probably ever notice but you. So I'm going to go hammer those down, and then we're going to meet at the cylinder arm and we're going to top stitch. Okay, so we're here at the cylinder arm machine. We're going to get started. I went ahead and hammered my little side seams down. Helps tremendously. If you work with leather, it'd be a great thing to do that always. And I'm just going to start right here at the side. Make sure I hold my threads, and we're going to stitch. Hold my tails here. Once I do a few stitches, I can let them go. Do one little back stitch here, and then we are done with the top stitching. So now we're going to close up the bottom. So we're just going to stay right here at the cylinder arm to close up this bottom. What I want to do is open up this zipper on the inside and pull out the lining of the zipper. So basically pull out the zipper pocket. Okay, just like that. Then from there, I'm going to reach inside and grab the bottom of my lining pieces. So let me grab both of them, and then I'm just going to pull them out the pocket. Okay, so here's that little square that we cut out on that end. And a little square over here on this end. And we had marked the centers of our lining, so I'm just going to clip these. And we're going to stitch across the bottom. Now, if you remember, as we came down the side, we increased our seam allowance to about 5/8. So we're going to actually stitch this at about a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and trim this seam allowance down. And then we're going to open up these corners. Okay, so the corners are closed. We're going to open them up. We're going to match the bottom seam with the side seam. We're going to clip it, and then we will stitch it. Do the same thing on the other side. So there's our square. Pull this out a little more. Okay, we're just going to open it up. So I'm going to take both sides and just pull and open it. And then match up those seam allowances. And clip it. Now we're going to sew this with just a regular 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're going to trim off that edge. And we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So I'm just going to stick it under there, take a couple stitches, back stitch. Clip all these threads. I'm going to Let's trim the seam allowance down. And then the bottom is done. So we're just going to shove that back in the bag. We're going to make sure it looks okay before we close it up. So just kind of take a peek in there. Feels good. Everything looks good. So now we have this pocket we need to close. So just turn the side seams under. I usually make sure that the seam allowance is going in the same direction. I don't try to open this up. I usually just turn that under and then do the same thing with this one. And then if you pull it, it will kind of automatically fold. And you could certainly take this to the iron and iron it down. I'm just going to put a couple clips in here. And then when you sew this closed, you want to use a really small seam allowance, so like a scant 1/8 of an inch. We're just stitching the very edge to close it. So there we have the pocket sewn shut. So let's stick it back in. You're gonna need to poke those corners down in the pocket real good. That's where you have a little bit of bulk. But you should be able to get them down in there pretty good. Just use your finger to get them down in there. All right, zip that pocket up. All looks good in there. Nice tight fit. So we're going to put our zipper pull on. And then we're going to put our zipper end on. So with the zipper pull, if by chance your teeth are not exactly lined up at this end where it shuts, this is where you can cheat it a little bit. If you need to put one side in a little further than the other, you can certainly do that just to get this part looking good, because we can cut off any excess on this tail. So let me get this in here. See. So the teeth are off, maybe one tooth on one side. Let's see how it looks over here. It looks really good. So I'm going to leave it just like that. So when I put my zipper end on, I usually fold this quite a ways down and put a clip on it, and it just kind of helps the ends hold so that they don't come apart. So I'm just going to even this up. I'm going to put a little bit of glue in my zipper end. You can use some Beacon 3-in-1, you can use whatever you have. I just happen to have some of this Liquid Fusion that I bought a long time ago at a show, and I really couldn't tell you where or when or how. It's been around for a long time. So I'm going to slip this on. And you could certainly use a piece of leather here instead of using a piece of hardware. There's lots of designer bags that have leather on the end here. Get my little screw. I dropped so much when I sew, I always pray that I don't drop my little screw, so I will never find it. Okay, so there's my zipper end, good to go. I'm going to tuck that in, and you can make this as long as you want. I have someone that had asked me to make a bag one time. I left it long, and instead she wanted me to cut it like almost even. So it's all personal preference as to what you prefer. The idea is that you can open the bag fully. So if you have it stopping right there, you can't really get that part open. Where if you have a longer tail, then you can open the bag the entire way. So that's kind of the reasoning behind it. Okay. So now let's talk about handle connectors, and let's get those handle connectors on and get our crossbody strap finished. I have my little strap connectors here. Of course, we top stitched them in the first step, and I edge coated, put some base coat and edge coat on them, so they're ready to go. So we're going to measure, and when you measure, you want to measure from this point right here, this actual curved edge, the very edge of the curved edge. Don't measure from the straight portion here. You're going to measure from the curved edge. You can measure in 1/2 inch, and we're going to make a little mark. We're going to punch holes in this. And of course you want to get it centered. Now this part of the bag is a little different than the original bag that we did. And I changed it up because I felt like this was a little bit more beginner friendly. You don't have to worry about possibly cutting your stitches when you put your strap connectors on. These are going to go at the top here. Okay, so I think it's a little easier. So go ahead and punch holes. And then take your D-ring or your triangle ring, whatever you may have, and slide it on. So I'm just going to kind of bend these a little bit, and we're going to slide those connectors on. So I'm going to slip that in and just fold it over. Now from here, when we put it on the bag, we're going to mark where to put the hole. So I'm going to, on both sides, when I put this on, I'm going to put it to the left of the side seam. So you're not putting it right over the side seam, because if you do, you're going to end up cutting these side seam stitches and your bag's going to fall apart. So we're going to put it on the side here. So I'm just going to kind of go like this, and then with my pen, I'm going to mark where that is. So just put a little dot. So now I know exactly where that needs to be placed. So I'm going to punch a hole. And you're punching all the way through the bag. And then you want to take a rivet. Now depending on the thickness of the material you're using, you can maybe use a 10 millimeter, or you may have to use a 12 millimeter rivet here. You definitely want it to not come apart and be strong enough. So if there's any doubt, use a little bit larger rivet. So I'm just going to put the rivet through, so the rivet is through the bag. And now I'm just going to slip this other side on. And that rivet's probably a little too short. See how it's barely sticking out? That's not going to work. When I put this cap on, it's not going to fully catch. So I'm going to increase my rivet. This was an 10 millimeter. I'm going to go with a 12 millimeter. So I'm going to repeat. I'm just going to put the rivet in, put it through the hole, bring this side down and over. And then put the cap on. Okay. So see how that's to the side of the side seam. So we're going to do the same thing with this one. Slide this on. And again, we're going to put it, I accidentally put mine on the right. I think the pattern says to put it on the left. It doesn't matter what side you put it on as long as you do the same on both sides. Okay, so I made my little hole. Go ahead and punch this. And punch it all the way through. And take my rivet, stick it in, stick it through the hole, bring the other side of the rivet, push it on, and then we'll put the cap. So now we're going to go ahead and set this using a rivet press. So I'm just going to slide it in. Okay. And it's pressed in. And so now we're going to press in this side. Make sure it's lined up. Okay, and just like that, we have them set. So I can re-zipper my zipper. And there we go. So now let's look at the crossbody strap and what we need to do for it. We have all the pieces and parts here that we need for this crossbody strap. And this is a little different, just another way to do a crossbody strap in leather. So I have this one large piece. I have two smaller pieces, and then I have this one large piece. I want this one large piece to be the piece that goes over my shoulder, okay? So what I'm going to do is put a D-ring, not a D-ring, I'm sorry, a rectangle ring on each side so that I can connect the other two sections, one on each side. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and measure the 1/2 inch. Now in the pattern, I show you how to do a crossbody strap with a slide adjuster. So this is just something a little bit different, something that you can think about doing with leather. You have to come up with unique ways to do straps in leather because a lot of times you can't get that full 55-inch length. So I'm going to punch these holes. And I'm going to put a rectangle ring. Fold it over about 1 inch and just mark where my next hole needs to go. And I'm going to use the 12 millimeter rivets again, so everything stays the same on the outside of the bag. So put this through. Put a cap on. Do the same thing on this side. Fold it over about 1 inch. Mark where the hole is going to go. Punch the hole. And then put a rivet. Okay, so now let's set these rivets. Use the same rivet press. Okay, so now we have the part that's going over our shoulder. So from here, we need to go ahead and add these. So this is going to be the part, put it on right, that will be adjustable. So let's measure a 1/2 inch, one more time, on just one side. And again, I'm measuring from the top of the curve. And we're just basically going to repeat the process we just did to get these on the other side of the D-rings. So I'm going to fold this over. And I'm just making sure that my knot is going to be on a side that is hidden, okay? Because if you remember, we started stitching down here or you know, close to one edge so that when this flips, you won't see that knot. So I gotta punch the other side. So let me make sure this looks about the same, which it does, and you can certainly measure. Sometimes the eye looking at it is more accurate than measuring. Can't tell you how many times I've measured something and then it's off. How can it be off? Okay, so I'm going to put this in. Let's go ahead and set it. And we'll get our press right here. Okay, and do the other side. So now we have this long strap and we have these rectangle rings. It's part of it. So from here, we need to slide a swivel clasp on. And then this is what we're going to have as being adjustable, this part here. So that we can either have it longer and have it down here, or we could pull it up on both sides and have it shorter. Okay, and we're going to do that on both sides. So let's put the actual button here on this part. So this is coming down, we have our strap adjuster. And we're going to put the button evenly spaced here. And then we'll put several holes on this side so that the buttons can come through. Okay. So let's make them both the same. I think I'm about ready to have buttons everywhere. Use these. So let's measure a 1/2 inch. And then let's measure an inch away from that 1/2 inch. So basically from your edge, you're doing 1 inch and 1.5 inches. Okay, and I have 2 dots on there. So we're going to punch holes and we're going to set our buttons on there. So we're going to put our screws in and then screw the button on. Now I do suggest, and I will go back and do this, that you put a little glue in this to hold it down, and so that these screws don't come apart. So I'm just going to tighten this with my hand for right now, but once I put the glue in, I'll tighten it with a screwdriver. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Kind of funky looking. You see the screws on the back. So we're going to do the same thing on this other one. We're going to do a 1/2 inch and then 1 inch from that dot. So now it's time to punch our holes. So I would say the first set of holes, you certainly don't want to go down too far. It would probably be about there. So to determine where that is, I'm just going to kind of press down on this, and I should be able to see the indentation that it made. One right there, and there's one right there. That should be 1 inch apart, so let's double check. And it is. So now I'm going to make holes 1 inch all the way up. And I'm actually going to get my grommet tool to do that, my measurer, just to make sure I'm exactly right. So here's the tool. This is just that ruler that I show you all the time. It's hard to see. Let's see. Maybe you can see it against that. No. You can probably see it against something. Here, you can probably see it against this. Okay. So it's from the Template Shop is the name of it now. And it just has measurements all the way down. If you have 1 rivet in your strap, if you have a 1 inch strap with 1 rivet, you can have a 1 inch strap with 2 rivets. You can have 1.5 inch strap with 1 rivet and then a 1.5 inch strap with 2 rivets. And it's all evenly spread out so that when you make your marks, you can just line this up on your strap and it works great. So I'm going to line up the 1 inch and 1 inch. And I'm just going to keep moving it. This thing keeps wanting to fall on the floor. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, so 4. Okay, and that's as far as I'm going to go. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 marks here. So I'm going to make 7 holes. And then once I do that, I'm going to take this strap, lay it on the other side so that I can make sure I get all my holes lined up and everything is looking good. So when you punch this, you want the rounded part to be towards the end of your handle. So I'm going to put that rounded part right on the dot, and then I'm just going to go through and punch all these. So now I have all my holes punched through, and you can see how there's like a, you should be able to see, try to see how there's a slit in that at the bottom of that hole. That's giving this room to get into this hole and then the slit kind of closes up and you don't see it. So that would be at the longest setting. And then if you want to switch it to a shorter setting, you can just undo, basically you're going to say undo, just unbutton, and then go up to a different one, wherever that may be. Okay? And that's how you do these buttons. They're super easy. And it's really easy, easy with the tool. If it's something you feel like you're going to do and you want to do it regularly, it's worth investing in this little tool. They're not that much. I'll link it down below for you. Okay, so I'm going to just match these up. I'm going to punch all the holes in this side, and then I will be done. So here she is, the Bircham. And here is the completed strap. So you see you've got these little buttons on each side, then you have the hardware here, and that just adds a whole nother element to the bag. These kits are available on the website. The kit will not include the buttons though. The kit is going to include one D-ring and then a slide buckle. So you look for those. We have a lesson in this color here, which is kind of a, the camera's picking it up as a little more orange than it is. It's kind of a light brown. It does have some orange in it, but it's really a beautiful, beautiful leather. This is a Chanel leather, and I don't know if I mentioned that before, but it is. And then also the dark brown in this same leather. And it's a lizard print. If you can kind of see that. And it's just beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, the Bircham. Until next time, happy sewing.